Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. I'm going to ask you the same question I always ask. Can you hear me? But I'm going to ask you a different question this time. What'd you think of that intro? Can you believe I made that myself? I really did. Yeah. 46 years old and learning how to do things like editing videos. It's actually a lot of fun. You know what else is a lot of fun? It's a lot of fun getting in a fight with the government and meeting a whole bunch of people because of it, and then traveling all over the place, meeting more people, bumping into them in different parts of the world, across the Atlantic Ocean, talking to them at political meetings or like the UCP AGM, things like that. That is a lot of fun. I did that intro video and I put that little thing at the end, not because I like looking at my ever getting rounder face, but because I was feeling a little bit nostalgic today. And no, not the nostalgia like, the TikTok videos where that makes you want to jump back to the screen and go to the 80s and sit in the basement and play your new Nintendo or Super Nintendo game. Not that kind of nostalgia, but a different kind of nostalgia that I'm feeling around the people that I've met. You saw in that intro, there's a few people that I met in Ottawa, some that I met at political functions, things like that. It's been a very enriching experience. It's really, really cool. And there are people that I meet from time to time and they say, "Oh, Chris, I'm so sorry what the government did to you." And I stopped them in their tracks now and I say, "Listen, that's probably the best thing that ever happened to me because it changed me from being a uninvolved, apathetic, lazy, largely selfish individual to something different." And I don't know how to describe myself. You probably do a better job describing me than I would, but I don't feel like that anymore. I feel like I want to be involved. I feel like I want to talk to people, even though crowds terrify me, even though I don't really like people per se, but I'm just hungry to know more about everything. And I want to know what people think about everything. And that feels really cool. So that's why I did that. And that's the kind of nostalgia I'm talking about. So that's led me to this strange situation where I happen to find myself in front of live viewers from time to time doing a podcast, staring at my computer screen with my webcam in the way and talking to the internet, something I never would have done before. And it's not a new thing. And it's not just me. There's millions of people all over the world that have found a voice and they have found an outlet and an audience, and they're sharing truth. Now, what's happened because of that is that the state-funded media, the media that is quite literally paid to deliver the government's messaging to us, they say they're not, but we know they are. They've started to lose control of the media. What was once the alt media has now largely overtaken the mainstream media, and the mainstream media is really feeling it. Ratings are down, mass layoffs, huge pay cuts, like you name it. They're in really dire straits. And people like our guest tonight, Mr. Shaun Newman, they find themselves with a growing audience, massively growing audience. He's got one of the fastest growing podcasts in the West here. It's absolutely amazing what he's done. And all he had to do to get that viewership is tell the truth, because they're sick of being lied to. They want to hear the raw, unscripted truth, and Shaun gives it to them. So I invited him on the show tonight to talk about that. I wanted to kind of get an idea of how he got to where he is and what he thinks about the shift in media. And of course, we're going to go into different subjects if I ever stop hogging the screen and let him on. But that's what I really want to talk about tonight. So without wasting any more of your time and Shaun's, I would like to welcome Mr. Shaun Newman to the Chris Sans Carey show, because Carey couldn't make it. Thanks for coming on, Shaun.
Thanks for having me, Chris. No, it's been long overdue. I think we first ran into each other at one of the stops along the convoy. I believe Chris Barber introduced me to you, and I was trying to track you down for an interview on the road to Ottawa, but as you can imagine, that was a busy time. And
Yeah.
no, it's long overdue, but everything in the big man's time. So I'm not stressed about it on this side. It seems fitting that it finally happens and we get to run into each other at the UCP AGM. I do find it funny that you don't like big crowds. I didn't know that. I was like, oh, that's
Not at
funny
all.
because you seem to run into big crowds, or at least that's what it looks like to me all the time.
Yeah, that is true. And last night I delivered a speech about Alberta independence in Wimborne, Alberta, which is just kind of a little bit outside Three Hills, and it was a packed room. And I stand in front of those crowds, and I'm really freaking nervous. I'm actually terrified. And I tried that thing imagining everyone naked, but most of the people are quite old, so that didn't work out very well for me. But I'm managing somehow. So
Well, I tell you this, I was just talking to a younger girl who was talking about, being terrified of going on stage, and I was like, oh, in college I took a course, and it was public speaking, and I was expecting to hear all the secrets of how you get rid of that fear. And the lady came out and was like, you want to know how to get rid of the fear, and everyone's, in the waiting, and she's like, I'm still fearful of coming in and talking to you, and she just rattled off how you have to maybe come to terms with it. And I reshaped my brain, I guess, on it to make it mirror a big hockey game. Like when I'm stepping on the ice, there's nerves, and it takes about, what is it? First pass, first shot, first hit. You got to find a way to get yourself in the game, and then you kind of lose that all those nerves. And to me, standing in front of a live audience or being on stage, I mean, I guess they go hand in hand, or even hopping on a live show. To me, there's always those nerves. You just gotta, you just kind of deal with them, and it's come to enjoy them actually more than fear them now.
yeah, and it helps when we're able to have interesting conversations about things we're passionate about, and we're learning things. Like, how many podcasts have you done since I ran into you on the way to Ottawa? How many are you at now?
Uh, well, I'm at 966. So,
Wow.
um, I think, when I first started the podcast, it started in 2019, and it was roughly around 180 where I went from interviewing. Episode 200 was Glenn Sather, but it was about 15 before that where I started interviewing Peter McCullough and Daniel Smith and a whole host of other people. Fans of the mashup. I interviewed twos right along that time, and I started interviewing people a little outside my scope. But since Ottawa, probably 600 plus, about 250 a year is roughly what I'm doing, give or take.
Well, that's a lot of people to talk to, and that's a lot of perspective to gain as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I hate to try and keep up with the news cycle of Canada because
Yeah.
every time I close the laptop and the next day you open it back up, it's just like this happened and this happened and this happened. And so people are, go, you should do less, you should do more, whatever it is. And I just found a rhythm of Monday through Friday. I release new episodes. And in Canada, right now, there's not a dull day. It just seems like there's always something going on. And that's probably true in the States or any other country you pick. But here in Canada, with, when Justin Trudeau was leading, and, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here, but,
Oh, yeah.
I'm kidding. Anyways, Justin Trudeau to me is kind of a swear word. But now you got Mark Carney, and like, it's just like every week there's something new happening in Canada what makes you scratch your head. And, I didn't pay attention to politics before probably 2019, if I'm being honest. I had my first child um, in 2016, and that always makes you take stock of the world and kind of refocuses your priorities. So before then, I can't sit here and act like I knew much about politics. And certainly before 2021, I would say I knew next to zero, other than I disliked Justin Trudeau.
Mhm.
And then when I started into all these episodes and all these different perspectives, it really has been um, you know, I don't think college could offer the course that I'm on right now, or the listeners on for that matter.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It is quite the learning curve. I didn't know anything about politics either. I was 90% politically apathetic. I didn't know how it worked. I knew we could vote. I knew we had some documents that were supposed to protect us from things, but I didn't really know the meat and potatoes of it like I've started to. And now I've been learning for, ever since the government came for me. That's what got me involved. It was in the government. They targeted me and they wanted to shut my business down and throw me in jail. So then I had to start learning these things as a matter of survival. And even since then, I've only kind of scratched the surface, but what I've found has been it's quite alarming actually. Some of the truths that I've uncovered, that I've also seen manifest in things like what they're doing to Chris Barber and Tamara and the Coots guys and some of these other things that we just feel are it's not quite right. There's something wrong there. Um, it's because none of us really knew anything about these things. And why would we? We're comfortable. We had our things. We had our interests. You had you're doing your sports stuff, your sports podcasting, and politics was kind of the dirty topic that nobody wanted to talk about. And I was trying to run my business and run my restaurant and didn't really want to talk about politics because I would piss off some of my customers. But then here we are. We find ourselves in the midst of it. And then I met you in Ottawa, and I should apologize. You tracked me down probably 3 or 4 times in Ottawa asking for podcasts, and I was like, oh yeah, we'll do it soon. We'll do it soon, and then we just never did. So yeah, sorry about that.
Well, don't apologize. I mean it. Like everything happens when it's supposed to happen. So us getting together on your show now, and then hopefully in the near future you'll be here on my side of things, and I'm not worried or stressed about it one bit. I learned very early on. I got to interview Don Cherry, and you can imagine a hockey guy growing up. We used to watch Rock'em
Wow.
Sock'em every Christmas,
Yeah.
and I just remember thinking, "Holy crap, is this gonna like? I don't know. Am I gonna have like what's tomorrow gonna look like?" And then I woke up the next day, and tomorrow was just another day, and I was like, "Oh, like no one guest is ever gonna just put you on this realm." And maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe maybe I could get one guest and then put you on a different realm. But you've seen the news cycle. It lasts for
Yeah.
24 hours, a
Yeah.
week. The Freedom Convoy was special. It lasted a lot longer than a week, but certainly, the news cycle in Canada or elsewhere, it's got a quick, like we forget pretty darn quick what's just happened. And so, like, when you're talking about the different things government's doing, how about Francis Widdowson getting arrested at University of
Yeah.
Victoria, right? Like, that should unnerve people. It's just another way of silencing a topic in Canada that's uncomfortable. And even myself at times, I'm like, man, do I want to go into this again? And then you sit and listen to Francis, and here's this articulate woman talking, and you're like, man, to get arrested for that in Canada in 2025, it doesn't shock me anymore, but certainly once upon a time it did. And like once again, every week there's something new happening. It wasn't what was it? Was it 2-3 weeks ago? We had the ostriches, and you just keep going back and back, and you can just pick out other red flags of where Canada's at here in 2025 as we close in, I guess, on the beginning of 2026.
Yeah, and I've been watching these things, and I always try and kind of boil it down to the lowest common denominator. Like, what's at the root of this? We see a lot of symptoms of what's going on. The ostriches, that was a symptom. My arrest for protesting, that was a symptom. Francis Widdowson getting arrested, that was a symptom. And I think the disease, it's a disease that was allowed to take hold in this country because people failed to show up. They failed to have those uncomfortable conversations when they needed to, and instead we kind of just withdrew and thought, well, we'll just let other people deal with it. We'll elect a new politician, they'll deal with it. But it festered, and now it's resulted in things like what we're seeing. Like that crowd of kids at UVic, that was surreal to me. Like our universities are supposed to be institutions of open debate and knowledge, and they're chanting and screaming and spitting like I don't even. It's like an animalistic programmed thing, So when I see that, I think to myself, man, it's more important now than ever that anybody who has a voice use it and they share as much as they can, so that people can at least become aware that there's a problem that we can fix. So I think the uncomfortable conversations are certainly, well, yeah, they're uncomfortable, but they're definitely necessary nowadays, for sure.
Yeah, I guess it just Francis. I don't mean to say her getting arrested doesn't shock me. That certainly raised my eyebrows. But like I had Billboard Chris on. I forget what that was. Was that 3 years ago? Forgive me, Chris. I had him on multiple times, And if you remember his videos, and they're probably still going on, right? He was getting the same treatment.
Yeah.
And like there's just this long list of when you go into a mob-like mentality, there's only one that sticks out to me where it didn't act like that. And we were both there. We both
Yeah.
saw it. And that was pretty surreal. So my brain goes, "Oh, that's how a protest is supposed to go." But every protest I've been at since then, there's always a faction that acts exactly how Francis has been treated, or Billboard Chris, or the list goes on. And when they have greater numbers than you, they act in really disgusting ways that are really hard to watch. And I can't imagine being Francis or Billboard Chris, or on along the line, and stepping into those realms day after day, knowing that's coming, because that's not a healthy humanity, in my opinion. It's okay to have a differing opinion, but um, I liked how Charlie Kirk tried to engage. At least that's how it looked from all the tape I've watched of how he did it, and gave space for people to come and disagree with him. Now he disagreed back with them, but you need dialogue. We need discussion on so much. And for I don't know how long of your life, but certainly in my lifetime, I got to think about it to I think Ron McLean and Don Cherry, honestly, they disagree, and Ron probably didn't agree with Don all the time, but they were allowed to have their discourse on a segment until they weren't, right? Then they removed Don Cherry, and since then, to me, that was one of the big turning points, because hockey's such a big part of our Canadian culture. As soon as they said, "No, Don Cherry's gone," and didn't like parade him across Canada and give him a farewell goodbye to all the people who loved him, it was like open season on, "No, you can't think that way." And we're not, you watch the politicians yell at each other over and over and over again. You're like, where are we getting to? Like, are we are we just clicking or getting clickbait so then we can, put it on our phones and feel good about the conservatives, or maybe feel good about the liberals, or heck, maybe you're one of those, probably not listening to this show, or probably not listening to mine, but maybe if you're a big NDP person, maybe they have some clips that you're like, yeah, they're sticking it to the man. They're sticking it to Danielle Smith. I don't know. Like, I just see the discourse in society is really um, deteriorated, and it continues to.
Yeah, I feel like Don Cherry and Jordan Peterson were the canaries in the coal mine. When we saw those two men, and Don Cherry was no intellectual slouch like that. He's a smart dude. Jordan Peterson, absolutely genius. And we watched them get, yeah, not the celebrated farewell like they deserve, but dragged through the mud and through the media and berated. They went through all those things. Don Cherry, he's a little older, and I don't know. You probably talked to him about this, but I imagine he just wanted to quiet down and do his thing. But Jordan Peterson, he became one of the most outspoken voices for this type of thing, and he built an absolute an empire on the idea of telling the truth, which is kind of the same thing as what you've done, because I think people have been watching the mainstream news or mainstream sportscasts and stuff like that. They're always scared to have I would argue, a conservative view, and people, they notice these things. So when someone starts sharing things that they're more aligned with, they're very receptive to it. And you found your audience, and now you've got a really big audience, and they appreciate these things. So it's interesting to see how they've tried to silence by using the stick and spitting on people and calling them down and stuff like that. But it's actually kind of backfired on them, because so many people were done with that. And now we live in this world where the news doesn't just come from 4 channels on TV. It comes from millions of podcasters and influencers all over the world. And you're one of them.
Yeah, well, I appreciate any compliments, because I mean, like, I look at what you've gone through and what so many of my guests have gone through, and I'm just I don't know. I don't know what the right word is, a conduit maybe of just trying to get their voice heard by um mainly Albertans. But I mean, on the flip side, like the Spotify Wrap this year was interesting. My top 5 countries that were listening to me: Canada, which shouldn't surprise anyone; United States, which probably shouldn't surprise anyone; but then it was the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia. And I might have those 3 mixed up on where they fit in it. But that kind of surprised me. I was like, oh, okay. I don't fully understand that. But I guess on the flip side, I do understand, because when you tune into um, CBC or Global, or there's times where I can stomach it. I'm married to an American, so I go down and I watch CNN, and like at times I can stomach it for like, man, am I making 5 minutes? And then at other times I'm like, what are they talking about? Like, this is just junk. And as soon as you've pulled yourself off of that, pulled the cord out of that one, and started listening to some of these people, you're like, this is the conversations I want to hear. And I'm just trying to do my best at doing that, and I was fortunate enough to, you know, talk to Danielle Smith before she ever ran for premier. And I remember just thinking, who the heck is this lady? Like, I'd never heard of Danielle Smith. You can imagine this in Alberta, right? To all your hardcore political nerds out there, and I don't mean that offensively. There's people who can or hockey nerds. They can go through every stat of every hockey player, right? And when I first started into politics, I remember having three of them on so they could just break down how on earth Danielle Smith could be the leader of a party and not be an MLA. And that didn't make any sense to me, right? And then, of course, now it's just, oh, that's just part of it. Like, you're seeing it play out over and over again. Naheed Nenshi would have been the most recent win the NDP, and then have to sit on the outside. And it's kind of funny, right? Except that was Danielle Smith earlier. And so I just kind of, I don't know. Somebody once told me finding the truth is kind of like backing into a light switch, and it lights up the whole room, and then you're like frantically trying to turn the light switch off because you're like,
Yeah.
holy crap, what did I just see? And
Yeah.
for me, I mean, I was the probably even more than moderate on COVID at the start. I was like, nope, we're going to get through this. The government, isn't against us. They don't, and on and on and on. And I mean, now people know where I'm at with everything. And honestly, yeah, the light switch is probably the best thing to describe how on earth, a hockey guy turns into talking to the premier and different people of that realm. It wasn't by, I don't know, choice, I guess. Yes. But at the time, it wasn't even, you talked about politics being a bit taboo. Well, in hockey, there was two things that were taboo: faith and politics. You just kind of left that. We're going to talk about
Yeah.
some other things. Now, I find those two topics probably be the most important topics of our time. And there's a lot of other things that go into there. I'm a family man. I got 3 young kids and a wife, and I certainly try and bring on some different people to talk about that, because I think that's a problem in culture. But like, I don't know. I sometimes I try and figure out how on earth I got here, Chris, and all I did was I just kept recording. I just showed up and record something, and then again and again, and consistency and staying disciplined to what I was trying to accomplish, which, I don't know if I've probably scratched the surface. That's probably been it, on trying to figure out how things work. And every time I think I'm getting closer, then you watch what happens in the political realm or elsewhere, and you go, wait, that doesn't make any sense. And you start all over again.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Danielle Smith. So I I despised her, and I say that as a past tense, um, because of the floor crossing, and I felt like that was the mechanism that caused me to have a tough time, because the NDP were elected, and then my job was in jeopardy, and I had a tough time, right? So I despised her. Now, since then, I've realized, and this is kind of something I live by now. When something bad happens to me, I have a choice. I can either blame what I believe is the cause or who caused it, or I can look at myself and I can say, how can I take responsibility for this? Because I can control what I do, and I can control how I'm going to manage this situation, but I can't control how they're going to do it. So back then, I was still, blaming her. And it came to a point where I found myself in Olds at the Red Willow Barn, I think it's called. And we were at a dinner, and I was sitting right beside Danielle Smith. And I don't think I said a word to her for 30 minutes. I was just like vibrating. I couldn't even stand being in the same space as her. But I did end up talking to her, and I was very surprised at how gracious and eloquent she was. Like, she was totally down to earth, extremely polite. She could probably tell, she could probably feel the tension from me, but she treated me with the utmost respect. And since then, I've learned a lot of things about myself and about how politics works. And I've watched her do some things that were severely uncomfortable, take some positions on things that other politicians wouldn't dare. And now I would say that I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. I don't agree everything she's doing, of course, because we're two different people. But there is a little bit of admiration there because she bothers to actually speak the truth about these things. You mentioned the media. I'm going to quickly share this story with you. When we were in Ottawa, I was live streaming all the time. That was wild. I would open my phone and just hit live, and there'd be like 7,000 people watching. That was unreal. So I'm live streaming everything. I want to make sure people know what's going on, doing my best to share the truth, to counter the media. And at that time, my family, all in BC for the most part, they were mainstream media people, watch global news all the time, that kind of thing. And when I took my stand against the government with the COVID stuff, they're like, we're really worried about you. This COVID thing's really dangerous. Make sure you wear your mask and make sure you sanitize, and you should probably get that vaccine and all these things, right? Now they're not like that. But so they're watching mainstream media while we're in Ottawa. So one of my family members has me on a live stream in her left hand, and she's watching the news on her TV, and I'm at the same location. And she had this like eureka moment. The light switch flipped on, and she scrambled trying to turn it off. And I think she said something like, "Why is the news lying? Like, why are they lying? That's not what's going on." Because my nephew is there. I can see him, and I trust him. I know that he's not lying. Why are they lying? And so I think a lot of people had that same kind of eureka moment, and now we've realized that the whole idea we can't talk about politics and faith. Well, politics, I say this in my talking about the Alberta independence all the time. Politics affects your life from before you're born to after you're dead. Literally everything to do with your life. Everything is a political decision from someone that influences you. And your faith affects your eternity. So we're telling people not to talk about the two things that will affect them more in this life and the next than anything else. And somehow we're surprised that the result is not what we think is ideal, right?
You mean, Chris, the Toronto Blue Jays not winning the World Series doesn't affect the rest of my life?
Well, I'm sure it affected some people's lives for sure, definitely. But it's great to talk about sports, but I lived most of my life feeling like it was impolite to share the gospel with people, and I don't think that anymore. I'm happy to have those conversations, but that's the place that I ended up in my late 30s as a result of the conditioning of our society that it's impolite to talk about things.
Well, it's still impolite to talk about things. I just don't care, right? Like
Bingo.
I find like lots of people listen to the show, and but I I have some funny conversations. There's lots of proud people that listen to me, but there's also people that just turn me on when they're driving to work and nobody's around, so they can listen to it and kind of go, hmm. And then every once in a while they'll call and they what do you think about this? I'm like, well, you already know what I think, but all right, I'll give it to you. Because society, if you're still, working for one of the big corporations, you're like when the ATA thing was going on, the teacher strike. I don't know how many teachers text me. They weren't allowed to talk. They
Yeah.
were just like talking about all the things. I'm like, this is, but it's their livelihood. And I mean, what would COVID teach us? Like, I mean, I'm no perfect individual going through COVID. There's lots of things that happened during COVID, but at one point, how close was I to getting the shot? I would say I was closer than some, and I'm thankful I didn't. But it was a lot of people I had around me. It was the podcast, interviewing people, that really steered me away from it. But for the longest time, I didn't think it was that bad. Now, I'd like to go and sit and have a conversation with that Shaun and be like, so where are you at right now? Obviously we
Yeah.
can't, we don't have a time machine. We can't do that. People can go back and listen to me. I have, And at times I just want to reach through the mic or through the screen, I guess, and swat me, right? But I mean, so be it. We all have a journey to take, and COVID and the Freedom Convoy and everything in between, even since then, like there's just been a ton go on where more and more people are going, that doesn't make sense, right? And you think of all the options they have now. It used to be it all came from the States, Chris, or at least in my opinion, it did. Joe Rogan, Tucker was still on Fox at that time. I'm sure I'm spacing on like 15 other people, but in Canada, I felt like it was like, where are all the voices? And what I've learned since then is there was a ton of voices. There still are, but we were siloed off, and we still are.
Yeah.
Like how many times? Like I don't know about everybody else that started a show, but when I started covering the Freedom Convoy, I got my entire YouTube channel got nuked, and
So did mine.
I spent a lot of time trying to build that up, and getting to what was it, the 1,000 subscribers and so many hours list and listen to and trying to push it. And then just overnight it was just gone. And I was like, what the heck happened? And you think, I remember thinking there's nobody in Canada talking about this, but I've found there's got to be hundreds, if not thousands, of Canadians that have been talking about it. And I keep finding, I think it's taken us two guys living in the same province over 3 years since the convoy to finally sit and do a chat. And I'm like, and that's no knock on either one of us, but like, there's people over in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Quebec, go along the list, Ontario, that are doing these things. And all of a sudden we're just starting to, oh, where the heck did you come from? And then you start looking at them, you're like, holy crap, you've been doing this for a while. How the heck don't I know who you are? That's probably like the rise of independent media has been really cool to watch, but it has come through some hard work and pushing it because the forces have been against all of us. Because if you talk about certain things, everything goes away, and you got to start from scratch. Wayne Peters, a good friend of mine, talks about how many times he had his channel just removed over and over again. And I'm like, that's wild. It happened to me once. Well, YouTube's happened more than once, but I've been fortunate enough, Spotify and things like that. As crazy as COVID got, I got warning labels put over everything of mine, but it never got removed completely, which, I don't know. I guess that's a blessing because other places certainly removed everybody's everything.
I was interviewing, and not because I just wanted to. I was fighting for my survival, so I was trying to build a case for my position. So I interviewed Peter McCullough, Paul Alexander, Byron Bridle, like all the same doctors you probably had on your show. They've been at the Injection of Truth events in Calgary, and amongst all that, I shared a video of the first one was a video from El Salvador where they were talking about the COVID care packages that they were sending out to people that were close contacts or sick or whatever. And it had all the things in there. There was vitamin D, vitamin C, acetaminophen, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, all of the things in the McCullough protocol, who I had just interviewed on my show previously. So I saw this video on Facebook. I didn't share it right away. I took the time to actually phone the Ministry of Health in El Salvador. And in my broken Spanish and in the lady's broken English, we talked about this, and I confirmed that, yes, this is what they were doing in El Salvador to manage a pandemic. So I thought, why? Okay, they got smart people there. Obviously, it's working. Why aren't we doing it here? So I shared this, and I shared it on YouTube. Well, YouTube took that down and gave me a strike. I then shared some testimony from Dr. Ryan Cole, and he was talking about the dangers of untested vaccinations, or how we were dealing with the pandemic. And that got taken down. I got a strike, and I thought, well, I'm not going to get a third one. I just completely quit using YouTube. But at that time, there was influencers and podcasters that they were earning their living on YouTube, and overnight, poof, the government just completely gone. Now, 3 years later, 4 years later, whatever it is, I'm on YouTube, and I just decided to check my account, and I see these things on there, so I decide to appeal them. And I basically said, even Mark Zuckerberg said that you guys shouldn't have done this on behalf of the government, and it's come out now that these things are right, so you shouldn't have given me these strikes and suppressed my account. 5 minutes later, I got a response. Yeah, we're sorry. We've determined that our technology made a mistake, and your account is now not restricted. Like, wow. But for all the people who were doing that to make a living and telling the truth to make a living, that hurt, and it hurt big time.
Yeah, well, and in fairness, I think it raised a lot of awareness of how powerful some of these entities really are, and you saw a lot of public outcry. You can imagine. I remember listening to, I think it was the Dark Horse podcast, Brett Weinstein, talk about it, and how him and his wife Heather Hying, they'd had similar issues, and it wasn't just like, certainly COVID, the word vaccine, that word, all of a sudden you're flagged, removed, anything to do with it. Peter McCullough comes on your show, is you might as well not even post it because it's just getting taken off. And um, that started to it started to not just be one group of people. It started to be this large group of people mentioning any sort of words, and there was a whole list of them. And then people started to have like colorful ways to say what they didn't want to say so they wouldn't be removed, and everybody started talking about it. I mean, it took a while to backfire, but like it's really caused a lot of scrutiny, or just a lot of people are. I mean, Facebook at one time was a juggernaut, and I know a ton of people still use it. And in fairness, we're live on Facebook, right? But like that was a kick in the midsection to Mark Zuckerberg and everything for all that stuff to come out. I mean, X, everything it does now, Elon walks in and buys it, and they air a whole bunch of the files, and you just see how it's you know everything gets brought to light eventually, and I firmly believe COVID will be the same way. I mean, it's still coming to light, maybe not in Canada per se, but in other parts of the world, it's certainly coming up. You bring up El Salvador. I remember reading about Mexico and parts of India doing the same thing, having kiosks. And my big
Yeah.
thing was, is if we want to really get out of this, why doesn't the government bring in all these different people working in different spots and give a
Yes.
solution? Now, you go down that rabbit hole and you start to understand the control mechanisms here in Canada and elsewhere, and why they weren't looking for any solutions. They had one solution: line up, take it. Oh, you dropped dead. Don't worry about that. You didn't see that. People are dying from this all the time. And really this the psychosis, or this psyop was put on the entire Canadian population to just like, don't act like you're seeing anything. There's only one solution, and this is the solution. And anytime I hear anything like that anymore, there's only one solution. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's certain words that get to you, Chris, but like expert, we got an expert going to talk about something. I'm like, oh, my back goes up because I heard that way too many times. I listened to too many people tell me how to live my life, and and the way you had to do it, and the one thing you had to do, and you know, and like I feel like that's a lifetime ago. And I mean, it's only a few years ago, like it's crazy when you think about it.
It feels like, or seems like to me, that a lot of people, they find comfort in the mainstream narrative. So you mentioned oh my goodness, I lost it. It's too much going on. You mentioned how there was one solution and people were pushed to do this certain thing, but in other parts of the world they were doing other things and they were having success. I mean, there was I think it was Turks and Caicos or Trinidad and Tobago, one of the two named areas. They did a study starting in 2017 where they added things to the water to deal with waterborne parasites. Ivermectin was the last thing they added in 2019. They didn't have COVID. So it's like, okay, well, something's different there than it is here. What is it? When you ask that question, if they want to deal with it, why aren't they doing everything they can? There's only one answer. And the answer is they didn't actually want to deal with it. And when you understand that or realize that, that light switch goes on, and it's friggin' spot like floodlights in an auditorium, right? You cannot unsee that. And then you're in this uncomfortable spot where you realize that you've been lied to, you've been gaslit, you've largely bought into it. And a lot of people, they've started feeling that, and they just boom right back to the mainstream narrative. They got to go watch more of that so it can confirm their comfort zone, And I think those people, even some of them, are starting to come around now, but maybe not as quick as I would like to see. Would be better if they were better at being uncomfortable, but I guess some people just aren't.
Well, eh, I don't. People call it waking up, or there's lots of different terms with it. I don't know what to call it. It's uncomfortable. You know, um, one of the things about the ivermectin or different solutions to just get us out of it. Once you realize, if they showed anything of promise, they lose emergency use authorization for what they wanted to do. And they couldn't show any, like, you just follow the money. You just follow what's going on. And,
Yeah,
now as I start into things, if you really want to understand stories, you just start following the money. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I see. Okay, fair enough. But it's uncomfortable to think that society could be so easily manipulated that, like, you're staring around, you're going, but none of this makes sense. I'm here in Alberta, or sorry, in Lloydminster. We were an odd case. Half of our city is Saskatchewan, half of it's Alberta. So you can see, both provinces did a lot of things similar, but not the same. In Alberta, they closed down all the restaurants, swimming pools. There's a whole laundry list of things they did. In Lloyd, the swimming pool was still open, even though it was on the Sask side or on the Alberta side. Forgive me.
it's safer.
There there was restaurants still open because we're governed by the Sask Health Authority. So a lady got arrested. Shout out to Miranda. She got arrested in Lloyd at the swimming pool for not wearing a mask in the lobby of the swimming pool. But if you look through the
Arrested.
big, yes, if you
Wow.
look through the windows, you're seeing people in the pool swimming with no masks on. And I remember sitting in the hot tub when we took the kids there, because it was one of the few things you could do where they didn't have to wear masks and they could go have fun. And you're looking around, and I remember being like, oh, I guess COVID can't swim. Because you're just like, this doesn't make any sense. Restaurants, they shut them all down. Yet on our chunk of the world, they didn't shut them all down. They kept them, I forget what it was, certain occupancy or whatever the rationale was. And you're like, wait a second. But over there, they're not shut. I guess COVID can't go across the border. And you look at Sweden was the big one. And yet I just interviewed two journalists from Sweden, and they were talking about joining NATO. And I was saying, like, they got this long history of Sweden being this very independent nation. They stay out of it. They're kind of like Switzerland. In COVID, I'm like, you guys got it for the most part right. Like, you didn't shut everything down. Sure, they had a few rules come in. And I'm like, I just have a hard time believing you could fall for the propaganda of like everything going on. And yet he's like, the journalists are like, you may raise a good point. But he's like, the propaganda here on Russia is at fever pitch levels, and people just are falling into it. I'm like, that's interesting. So, I guess on what I do on a weekly basis is I go on uncomfortable topics that make me uncomfortable at times. But I want to understand. I want to try and figure things out, because in COVID, I just thought, the government's going to figure it out. And every time I think that or think back to that, I'm like, oh, there would have been a lot of people going, the government, when they get involved in things, make a real bungle of it, make a real mess of it. And there's lots of different examples here in Canada to point to. And I guess in my life, and I'm sure in yours too, Chris, we just want less government. Like
Mhm.
we got a really capable population here in Western Canada for sure. And I got listeners all across Canada. There's lots of great people. We just want government to stay out of it. But we've gotten to a point in Canada and elsewhere where government is just big. The bureaucracy is big, and they're spending not millions of dollars, billions of dollars, and they're just throwing it out like it's candy at a parade. And and everybody cheers for it. We're getting all these things, and I'm like, where's that money coming from? Like,
Yeah.
can we just take
Yeah.
a step back for a second and realize where is the money coming from? Let's just think about that for a second. Tell me what answer comes to you, and then just think about that. They're throwing billions everywhere. I don't know. I can get. I mean, you can get me rambling here for a long time. It's just COVID. You go back to COVID, and there was a lot of things there that just didn't make sense. And I'm glad I had this outlet to bring people on to just make me think a bit. Because then I went home and I stewed on it, and and then I bring somebody else on, and man, this is strange, and Canada 2025 seems like it's just more part of that strange narrative that, you tried to remove yourself from, and you can just see it playing out on different subjects, and people get emotional about different things, and it's hard not to be.
Can you imagine what this country would look like today if we didn't have independent voices with a social media reach that were able to be dissenters to the status quo? Can you imagine, like, if we hadn't been able to get that many people to go to Ottawa, nobody's speaking up against this. I think this would be a very, very different country today.
Well, I think it is 2020. It's the I I I called 2021 the winter of the dark days, but truthfully, they were. I mean, we weren't allowed to leave the country. You weren't allowed to get on any. It was just like, what is going on here? 2020, though, I was sitting still doing. I'd started my podcast 2019, right? I was still in my brain. I'm like, I just need to find some things that are going to bring people's spirits up, So I was interviewing. I don't know. Don Cherry would have been one of them, right? I was trying to um, find some things to maybe distract even myself. But if I got to go to a time when there was no media talking about the insanity of what Canada was becoming, it was probably 2020. We can remember that. We had our spoonful of communism full on, where there was nobody criticizing anything, and there certainly was. Like, full stop. There was a ton of wonderful people that were. I just think today you see all these different channels popping up. We didn't
Yeah.
like was it Northern Perspective wasn't a thing. Jasmine Lane wasn't a thing. Um, Chris Scott wasn't really a thing back then,
Nope.
Like, I certainly, I chuckled in your intro of, like, a kind of an unknown sports podcaster. Yeah, you're not wrong. I was known in a little, you know, in the area of Lloydminster probably, and I was slowly growing, but I wasn't, talking about what's going on in Canada. I was doing something different. And now I look across Canada and I just see all these people talking about it. Viva Fry is probably, he's moved to the States, but he's another Canadian who has really shined a spotlight on what's happening here.
We have some interesting things happening in Canada right now. I believe that the government doesn't like that we were able to, and when I say we, I mean collectively as a society, we were able to elevate certain voices and counter narratives to shift where we were going. The government doesn't like that. We have things being debated in Parliament that would take away your ability to do that. We have laws that could potentially, the government could say, well, Shaun, because you're talking negatively about this medical intervention that we recommend, you are now harming society and we need to arrest you. Like, this is the path that the government is trying to take. And I think they just got voted down. C9 just got voted down in Parliament, maybe today or yesterday. Correct me, somebody, if I'm wrong.
I
But
believe
this is where
I believe it's today, isn't it?
yeah, but this is where they want to go. They don't want people to be able to speak. They don't want me to be able to say Jesus Christ is the one true God. They don't want that because that's
Amen to that.
offensive. That's offensive to other people. And theoretically, we could go to jail for saying it. And that's one of many reasons why, and you know this, I'm a very strong advocate for an independent Alberta where we can we can write our constitution and enshrine these ideas that speech is always protected. Like, we can say what we want. We're free to criticize the government. We don't have that right now. And I know that for a fact because I used this line in a speech last night for the Alberta Prosperity Project. I said, "My name is Christopher Scott. I'm from Canada, and I have attended illegal church services under the cover of darkness for fear of being arrested by my government. My name is Christopher Scott. I'm from Canada, and I have been arrested for protesting the policy that my government was implementing on me in Canada," right? And I don't think if we sit on our hands, it's going to get any better. We got a lot of work to do.
Oh, well, certainly if we sit on our hands, it ain't gonna get any better. Full stop. Yeah. I can't disagree with that. It's interesting how they hide. You got free speech. You can say whatever you want, Chris. And then, well, I mean, and then Francis Widowsing gets arrested, right, for trying to open up conversation
Yeah,
on Kamloops.
because it's harmful.
Well, because yeah, it could hurt to have somebody say those things, and you're like, well, wait, I kind of want to hear what she has to say. I don't know if I'll agree with it, but I kind of want to hear what she has to say. It seems odd to me. Somebody's willing to risk getting publicly beat, surrounded, yelled at, spit on, dumped on her, arrested, and we're just supposed to act like they have nothing to say. Kind of curious. Aren't
Yeah,
you like? Isn't everybody else just kind of curious? Just a little
yeah.
bit. I just kind of want to hear what they have to say. Then I can make a judgment call and carry on. But I don't know. The liberals certainly, and maybe it's all political parties, government seem to
They want
think
control. They don't want dissent. Dissent is
se-
difficult.
seem to think we left to our own devices would destroy everything, and I just don't see that. I see something completely different than that.
Yeah, yeah. It's always for your safety, for sustainability. I'm reading Mark Carney's book Values. It's
Oh
quite a
yeah,
thick book. I'm finding it quite interesting, but some of the things he talks about is curtailing our rights and freedoms for sustainability. Like the ordinary person is going to have to experience some difficulty and not be as comfortable in order to survive. And I'm thinking, when he says ordinary people, he means me. He doesn't mean him, right?
correct.
We're the ordinary people that have to be uncomfortable, not the ones that are flying around in private jets with a carbon footprint. If you care about those things, bigger than like I don't know, something with a big
Well,
foot.
I think the thing that goes, and once again, I can't, I can just hypothesize, but I think they look at human beings and they go, we got a problem here. The environment's being harmed, and if we don't do something about it, then I don't know. Take your pick. World
You're all
burns
going to
up. We
die.
freeze to death. We all die.
Yeah.
And so they believe that human beings won't change unless they're forced to change. And I'm like, people didn't adopt the gas. Like, I'm sure people were just happy riding the old horse. And then this thing went flying by. I'm like, what the heck is that? Can I do that? And you think technology, like Chase Barber has been a really, really interesting man to listen to when it comes to EVs because he just breaks it down in a way you're like, oh, that makes sense. Why don't they do that? Why don't they do things that make sense? Because if they just did things that make sense, I feel like all of society would be like, heck, I want to do that. Instead, they grab the stick and they tell you you're gonna eat it, you're gonna take it. If you don't, you're gonna get beat. If you don't do that, we're gonna lock you up. We're gonna take everything away from you. We're gonna fire you from your job. You're not gonna be allowed to work. We're gonna just demonize you as social media and
But
in,
it's your
in media in
choice.
general. Yeah, but it's your choice. You have a
Yeah.
choice in the matter. Nobody forced you.
Back to the idea that human beings are going to destroy everything. I do believe that a lot of these conversations, a lot of these ideas come back to two main points. It's either human or anti-human. And for me, on the human side, I believe that God created this world for us. He gave it to us to be stewards of and manage and put order where there's chaos and improve things, which we have largely done. I mean, yes, there's we make a mess sometimes, but if you look at the way the planet is, nature is completely savage. It is chaotic. It doesn't manage itself, except that the forests overgrow. There's lots of dead brush, and then we have these extreme massive forest fires that wipe everything out. Nature starts again. That's the way nature works. Well, human beings, we're orderly. We create order where there's chaos. We make places habitable that were inhabitable before. And
Alberta,
Alberta, yeah,
Saskatchewan.
Alberta. So when I hear these things like, "Oh, we got to do something, we got to intervene with humans," no, humans are the interveners, and that's the perspective that that's the perspective as a God-fearing Christian. I see we are the stewards of this earth. We're here to create order, just like our God of order did, and we are not a virus on the planet. We're a beneficial to the planet. But the other side, they see us as useless eaters, as a virus that needs to be inoculated off the planet in order to survive. And so it's two very basic ideas. Of course, my idea is the true one, that life is sacred and we should be promoting humanity and flourishing as a species. But yeah, a lot of those political conversations, that's where they're rooted, in those two things.
Yeah, if you boil it down to the simplest of terms, yeah, I can't argue with that.
Well, I mean,
You're
I'm just a burger flipper, but that's my
well, I'm just a guy who chased a rubber biscuit around a ice surface for a good chunk of his career. So don't take
well,
what I say for the gospel. You want the gospel? Open a book
there you go.
and go read it.
There you go. And that brings up a great point. We free speech is awesome, but it does come down to the person who's listening to these ideas. Though the idea becomes a stepping stone for you to gain some knowledge. If you agree with something I say or you disagree with something I say, for those of you watching, research it yourself. Find out, for yourself what these things mean. Don't just take it to be the gospel truth, whether it's from Global News or the Chris and Carey show or the Shaun Newman podcast. That's our responsibility, right? Is to take the information and use our own brains to process it.
Yes, I have a lot of faith in my audience. They're a smart group of people, and they say some really smart things. And a lot of them are a heck of a lot smarter than me. One of the things that, talking about Canada, where we sit today, one of the things that unnerve me is probably not the right thing, because a lot of things at this point don't unnerve me. I kind of just like, oh yeah, okay. But Mark Miller, right? He was the one talking about hate speech, the Bible, certain verses. He just got appointed as Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. And I'm like,
oh, what could go wrong?
Like, what could go wrong? That moron comes out and says that stuff, and then he gets put in that position, and you want to know which way Canada's heading? I think it's pretty simple, folks.
I agree. I will be very bold and say Alberta's not going with them if there's anything we can do about it. It's going to be interesting with Lloydminster, though. Which, do we get both? Are we going to get half? I'm not sure how that works, but it's going to be pretty neat.
Well, to me, if there is a successful referendum, let's just play this out. Alberta wants out. It triggers an immediate domino, which is Saskatchewan. So I think as people from this area, you go, oh, are they going to divide? Like, are they going to have I don't know, more border markers? Are they going to have something down the middle to say this is the country of Alberta, this is Saskatchewan? I'm like, I don't stress about that, because I'm like, if Alberta goes, Saskatchewan is following suit like immediately. Like, I don't know how quickly they could do it, but I've watched all government after the Freedom Convoy and how quickly they did things. I'm like, they can do it pretty darn quick. Alberta gets out, Saskatchewan's not going to be far behind.
So maybe we just say, yeah, let's hold off on the wall for a little bit. We'll just see how it goes. I found that really neat traveling across Europe. You drive through 5 different countries and never know. You never know that you're in a different country. It's just a sign on the side of the road, and everything's the same. I think Alberta.
Well, do you think if Alberta leaves tomorrow, all of a sudden Saskatchewan's going to hate you? I don't think so. I
don't think so either.
I think there's born and raised in Saskatchewan. Two's on the mashup, born and raised in Saskatchewan. There's a ton of Saskatchewan folks who moved to Alberta. There's a ton of family connections, and if Alberta were to be successful in getting out, Saskatchewan will follow. I can't sit here and go, it'll be two weeks after, but I promise you it'll be fast. It's not going to be this 8 years down the road we're still talking about it. If if Alberta finds a way to get a successful referendum, and that were to actually remove all the ties to Canada, let's just take all the bureaucracy out of it for a second, folks, which is kind of suspending our common sense. But let's just assume you got out in a year time. In a year, you're just out. You just no more anything. Saskatchewan leaves within the next year. There's just no way that doesn't happen. That's gonna, I interviewed a lady, Karen Katowski, and she was talking about Soviet Russia, and she had written a paper on who she thought would be the, as the Soviet Russia is falling apart, Soviet Union, what country would be the first to gain freedom? She thought her hypothesis was the most oppressed. And then she found out actually it was the opposite. It was the people with the most freedom. When I look at Canada, who's got the most freedom? Alberta. Full stop. And then who's closely second? I would say, I mean, don't get me wrong, Quebec has all the laws in place. So you might argue Quebec. But there's a whole lot going on there that's,
It's a different kind of freedom.
Yes, it
It's
is.
different.
The second place, in my mind, is Saskatchewan. That's where the Freedom Convoy stems from, is the two provinces. And I'm sure there's other provinces. I don't mean to exclude anybody but you look at it and you go, the two freest provinces in Canada sit here in the West. And if one goes, the other will go.
It's going to be glorious. It's going to be wonderful. But we are just over an hour. So usually I just start scrolling through the comments a little bit.
Oh, sure.
If you have any other things you want to talk about while I'm doing that, feel free. I think I saw a couple things. There was a couple nasty comments, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm really glad.
Read those. Oh, please.
Yeah,
I love the nasty
in the comments.
Yeah,
at least they're listening, right? So, but they were way back there. It's been a high traffic podcast tonight. So thanks, folks, for watching. Appreciate it. Thank you, Barb. Barb says Merry Christmas, and she says it correctly. Merry Christmas to you as well.
There's lots of everybody.
Yes, absolutely. I see lots of comments from time to time, people saying, "Oh, no more politicians. We don't need politicians." No. We need politicians because they're supposed to do the things in service that we don't want to do. I don't want to worry about building roads. I don't want to worry about those types of things. I want to pay someone to do that. I'm happy to do it. I just don't want them to be corrupt. I think an independent Alberta should have like a Doge built in so that waste, fraud, and corruption is next to impossible. That'd be fantastic. Then we can have politicians. Alice says, this was when we were talking about the alternative treatments. She says, pharma doesn't make money off of healthy people. And that is true. And that's something that, I've had that conversation with Dr. McCullough as to why some of these things happen. And he shed some light on it. Same with Shaun Buckley. Shaun Buckley was on and he was talking about his discovery that Health Canada's mandate is to protect the intellectual property of pharmaceutical companies, not about your health. And he explains how it works. And it's like, oh my goodness, all of these things all of a sudden make sense. Pharmaceutical company has to recoup $1.5 billion that it cost them to bribe Health Canada to get the drug legalized so they can sell it to us. Of course, they're gonna help them make their money. But maybe that's just a conspiracy, I guess, right?
Well, Shaun Buckley is a sharp tack.
He is.
He's a wonderful, wonderful man who can speak very intelligently to what you're talking about. I always just, I used to, in a previous life, I used to sell chemicals in the oil field, separate oil from water. And in one case, get rid of H2S gas. And whenever I struggled with, they can't make money off ivermectin, I just go to what we did as a company out in the oil field. Over time, the profit margin goes down because you're trying to keep work. And then you have to come out with a new drug. And I don't mean pharmaceutical. I obviously mean separating oil from water. And you price it high and you get it to work. And then over time, it happens again. And you just have to keep inventing new things. Pharmaceuticals is no different than that. The difference is it's human beings they're dealing with. And, there's no money in healthy people. Well, actually, for them, there isn't. But for a whole lot of other people, healthy people do offer a lot of money for a lot of different ventures. Yeah, there's a lot of different things they can do. But certainly pharmaceutical companies, they got a new drug. They want to get it out there. They want to make sure that nobody knows about any of the side effects or any of that stuff. Nothing to see there, folks. And you got to be really discerning. You really got to pay attention to what they're doing and what's happening, food supply. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on about different ways they're trying to make a profit.
Yeah, and we live in a time where it's very dangerous to challenge that. If you do, sometimes you end up, I'm trying to find the comment here. Sometimes you end up no longer with us. Honey and Barry Sherman, they owned a pharmaceutical company, and they were planning on making, I think hydroxychloroquine was one of them, off-label, off-patent drugs to help with these sorts of things. Would have changed the face of the pharmaceutical industry in Canada. And, these billionaires, happily married people just mysteriously committed suicide to each other. So, I mean, nothing to see there, of course, but it's interesting that it came up in the comments. Now, back to something else that's very important. I was planning on doing a podcast, like a monologue type thing. This was one of the things I wanted to talk about. I might not get a chance, although maybe I'll come on and I'll do a late show tonight just to talk about some of these things. I think it's really important. But somebody asked a question in here. She asked, someone talked about the Saskatchewan Prosperity Project. That's a thing. It's they're going.
I actually interviewed Brad Williams, the president of it, and it comes out tomorrow. So if anyone's interested in hearing a little bit about the SPP, you could turn into the podcast tomorrow, and I have Brad Williams on talking about it. And I mean, they're obviously just getting the conversation started, but that's where it all starts. You got to have conversation to get the creative juices flowing, and to envision a better future. If we're not talking to one another, you can't possibly figure out where the heck you want to go. That's why conversation is so important.
So on that note, SPP on the SNP tomorrow.
Correct.
What time?
On Spotify, it releases at 3 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And then if you're out east, you don't have, you wake up and it's there. For X and YouTube, Substack, Rumble, Facebook, it comes out closer to 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time.
Oh, I almost forgot. So up here, where am I point? I can't point at, right here somewhere. There's a little QR code. That's my website. Please go buy something. It ships in time for Christmas. That's all I'm going to say about it. But also over here, the new one that's up there. Can I point at it? Am I able to do that right there? That's the Shaun Newman podcast website. Check it out. Go see what he's got over there. I think all of your stuff is searchable and cataloged on Spotify and stuff too, right? So you can search things by topic and find whatever podcast you want.
Yeah. Well, there's over 1,000 on the podcast now with the mashup. So every Friday we do Tues comes on. We do the mashup where we break down the headlines of the week, which is a task in itself. But Tues offers a little bit of colorful side to it that pokes fun at what's happening here in Canada, because you can be depressed about it, or you can try and lighten the mood a bit by just pointing to the obvious, like this, how stupid we are as a country right now. And then, weekly, Monday through Thursday, there's new episodes dropping. Today was Francis Widdowson and Tom Flanagan talking about Kamloops, but certainly Francis being arrested. And earlier this week, I'm trying to think now, actually, as I'm sitting here, because it's only Tuesday. So what the heck did I release? I'm like, what the heck did I release on Monday? That's funny. I can't remember. They all kind of blend into one another here. But what was Monday? Monday was, folks, Anton Chaikin, a historian out of the States, talking about the U.S. and who we are. And so that was interesting as well.
I actually grew up in Kamloops. I've been to that residential school. That's kind of close to home for me. And I found that comment, and then I hit my keyboard and I lost it again. Let me see. The comment was, there's a comment about, what about Jan Arden? Who the hell's Jan Arden? Jeez. Where is it? It was about Danielle Smith. And
while you're looking, Sharon Lee said, I haven't heard of Francis Widdowson. I'll head there after this. Francis Widdowson used to be a professor at Mount Royal. Apologies. Mount Royal. And she was let go. Forgive me. I want to say 2021, Francis. But I have 2 different episodes with her. One way, way back in the machine. And then, of course, one that aired today where she's talking about being arrested and some of her talking about just First Nations and how it's starting to be pushed on everything in colleges and universities into the sciences and math and different things like that. So you can, she's an interesting lady, and I believe still lives in Calgary, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, as far as I know, she does. She was canceled and canceled hardcore, but this like Frances is no slouch, and she is a firecracker. You listen to her speak about these things, it's phenomenal. So make sure you check that out. Here's the question I wanted to answer. The question is, thoughts on APP wanted a review on Danielle Smith. I'm going to clear that up right now. The Alberta Prosperity Project in no way, shape, or form is asking for a review on Danielle Smith. We have individuals that are members of the Alberta Prosperity Project. Some speak at events. They all have personal opinions. I have personal opinions that may not be the same or may not reflect the opinions of the Alberta Prosperity Project. So that is a complete non-starter. In no way, shape, or form is the Alberta Prosperity Project interested in any kind of leadership review on Danielle Smith. Anything to do with that is outside of the Alberta Prosperity Project, and you can be involved in those types of things. But seeing how this is my show right now, I will say that I would, if there was somehow a leadership review triggered for Danielle Smith, I would spend the entire time during that campaigning for her so that she won that leadership review, 100%. So there's where I stand on that. And that's not APP's position. That's my personal position. APP is nonpartisan, and they don't actually have a position on that. So hope that answers your question. Yeah, that's one of those things. The political news in this province and in this country is absolutely on fire. There's no shortage of stuff to talk about. If we just use ChatGPT and asked it for a list of the top 50 things to talk about, we could keep this podcast going for probably
all
days.
Yes.
There's that much.
Believe me, on the mashup every Friday, Chris, that's exactly how the document is that we go through. And that's a week's worth of headlines in basically Canada. We do add in a few from around the world, but not very many. It's mainly focused on what's happening here in Canada, and it's everything I can do to keep twos to an hour and a half. When he gets going, as people who watch the mashup know, he's a firecracker, and like there's a lot going on in Canada, and trying to wrap your head around it.
Well, I'm embarrassed to say it. I've never watched it. I have a hard time finding time to watch podcasts or read books or anything, so I don't.
Well, if you want to have a laugh,
I'm going to make an effort this week.
I tell you what, Chris, you want to have a laugh. 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. It's live on X. Just search Shaun Newman podcast, and I promise that you're going to have a chuckle or two, because twos is pretty quick-witted, and we've been doing it now. It's man, I think we are closing in on episode 200 of the mashup. We've been doing it once a week now. So what does that put it close to? Put it awfully close to 4 years every Friday. It started out on Tuesdays, I should clarify, and now it's moved to every Friday. And yeah, I went through grieving stages of Canada with that show, because I just couldn't believe that it was happening. And now you just let twos go and let them poke fun at just about everybody, because I mean, it's laughable, some of the things going on here in Canada, just full stop.
Nice. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to make some time and watch that. But speaking of time, we are hour and 15 minutes. I think that's probably good. I'm going to let you get on with your night.
I appreciate, Chris, I appreciate you inviting me on, and we're going to return the favor on my end here, hopefully, folks, in the next week or so. And if I can, I'd just like to make a plug for, I have my annual event come up in March.
March
I meant 28th.
To mention that. Yep.
It's the Cornerstone Forum. It'll be the 3rd year. It's happening in Calgary. And, it's got a whole list of people coming, notable from Canada, probably Matt Arrett, Sam Cooper. And then it's got people coming in from, down in the States, Tom Luongo, Martin Armstrong, Chad Prather, Karen Katowski, Alex Craner comes in from across the sea. And there's some others coming as well. So if you're interested in that, you can find all the details on the website, or you can text me too. On every episode, I have my phone number listed with the show links for the event as well. But that's March 28th, and the early bird prices for people, if you're going to buy tickets, now's the time. December 31st, prices go up. So, yeah, a shameless plug, but appreciate you allowing me to do it.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it because I actually meant to do that for you earlier. I haven't been to one. I'd like to. It just seems like there's always so much going on, and I'm in the middle of planning something. But I'm gonna put it in my calendar now, and hopefully that will make it happen. But yeah, check it out, folks. One of the nice things about these events, like what Shaun does here, the Cornerstone Forum, is that it gets together a group of mostly like-minded people where you can share stories, you can network. It feels good. Sometimes we feel like out in the world there's just so much against us, and there's so much, so many people kind of just being negative or whatever. It's nice to go to something like this where you can just connect with people and share stories. Super important. Take it from me. I make hamburgers for a living, so I know about human psychology, I think, or something like that.
Well, I tell you
I've
what,
been married twice, so I do know
you're not
about it.
wrong. The community that shows up there is something special. That might be the best part of it. And actually, when I was in Regina for the Prairie Rising Forum, I saw it again. Right, like it's just people, as much as they want to hear from the speakers, they just want to kind of like, can we talk about this? And everyone's like, yeah, let's talk about it, right? And you see the conversations start at every table. I have people show up who don't know a single soul, and by the end, they're leaving with like 10 new best friends. It's like super cool to witness. And as for not showing up to it, or not being to one, not showing up to one, that's not what I meant. Not being to one. That's why, they come around every year, and if you can make it, great. I think this year is hopefully going to be the best yet. But it's funny, when we talk Danielle Smith, the first event I ever did, Chris, was in March of 2022. And if you can think about that,
Oh boy.
I had to have been close to the first event to go on stage after all the restrictions released, and it was supposed
Yeah.
to happen when the convoy happened. I think it was the big man making sure that it didn't happen. We are supposed to have 400 people descend on a hall, and I had, a bunch of people coming, Danielle Smith being one of them. And then the Freedom Convoy happened, and we had to refund everybody's tickets. We had to just like mad dash as I'm sitting in Ottawa. And the first event I put on was March 22nd. Danielle Smith was on that stage, and alongside like a guy like Eric Payne, and some others. And that was a special night. I had no idea what I was doing back then. And it was, I chuckled about it now because somewhere there is video of it, of Danielle Smith being asked by the crowd if she'd run for premier. And she's like, well, there's not even, what are you talking about? Jason Kenney's the leader. And then it kept getting pushed. She's like, okay, if he were removed and I got asked, I would run. And there was like a standing ovation for it. So, it's a very interesting thing I try to put on. I try and make it engaging, but not so dark. I try to really give some optimism into the world that we're in. And well, I'll stop babbling about it. I appreciate you having me on here. And if anybody's interested in it, search out the Shaun Newman podcast, and would love to see some more people show up for it. Last year we had 650 people in Calgary, and so we're heading back to Calgary this year, and we'll see if we can't do it again.
Yep, that QR code just above my head there, folks. Scan that. That takes you to Shaun's website, and you can find your tickets there, as well as his podcast, contact information, and all that good stuff. Again, Shaun, thank you very much for joining me. I'm looking forward to visiting you in Lloyd in your studio. I think next week, something like that. I've got it in my calendar.
Right.
I won't forget. Google won't let me. Also, Google knows where I go all the time, apparently, but whatever.
Thanks again, Chris, for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to following up the conversation on the SMP side.
Sounds fun. Have a great night, Shaun. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Take care. Well, there you go, folks. 1 hour and 21 minutes. That's actually not too bad. I know there's a lot more we could have talked about, but it's getting late and I'm tired. I had an interesting night last night. I tried to go to bed early because I like to get up early and make you guys cinnamon buns, which I did today, by the way. There's piles of cinnamon buns, and there will be cinnamon buns tomorrow and the next day. So I get to bed, I'm just about to sleep, and my phone rings. And when my phone rings at night, it's important because my phone's on Do Not Disturb, so someone has to call twice. Anyway, I find out, oh, somebody hit my fence at the whistle stop. So, okay, get out of bed, go look at my fence at the RV park. Fence is destroyed. Oh, great. Now I'm driving around town looking for the car that broke my fence in the middle of the night, and got up anyway to go to the restaurant and make you cinnamon buns. So it was a very late night and a very early morning. So I can't even believe that I'm still up, but it's kind of showing because now I'm babbling. Anyway, thanks for watching the show. I appreciate that you folks follow still, even though it's not as exciting as when I was ending up in handcuffs. I really hope that I can continue to do these types of things and have these types of conversations so that it gives you at least something to think about. And if you have comments or challenges to anything I've said, please leave it in the comments. Get a hold of me via email, whatever. I tell people at the Alberta Prosperity Project meetings I speak at, if they think I got something wrong, I want to hear it. And if they think I can do something better, I want to hear about it, because the way we're going to get through these things and the way we're going to ultimately create a free, prosperous, and independent Alberta is if we rely on each other and we just do the absolute best we can. And you folks help me do that, even when you're being a dink and challenging me on something. I might get snarky on the internet, but it's just the internet, so who cares? Keep challenging me and challenge each other. And if you appreciate what I'm doing, then please leave a comment about that as well. If you really appreciate what I'm doing, go to that thing up. Go to that thing up there, that QR code, buy a t-shirt, buy a sweater or something like that. Represent my brand. I've got Whistle Stop stuff there. I have Alberta Independent stuff there. Lots of cool things. I really, really appreciate it. And it really means a lot to me when I see people walking around wearing my stuff like that. That is so cool that people want to wear Whistle Stop Cafe merch or Alberta stuff with the Whistle Stop Cafe hidden in it. So thank you very much for that. And that's how you can support my endeavors here. Have a great night, everybody. I might be back for maybe just 20 or 30 minutes in a little bit here to talk about those 3 things I mentioned on my Facebook page earlier. But if I don't, please forgive me. I'm tired, and if I don't get it tonight, I'll get it tomorrow. Have a great night. See you later. That QR code's Shaun's QR code, but click it anyway and buy tickets to his event. Sounds like it's going to be fun. See you there. Meow. Now the QR code's my blog. Click that one too.